Hello, hello, Breaker.
How are you doing? How are you doing, Tony?
Good. Welcome to PiFi number 111.
Ooh, we got some numerology on 222, 2025. Nice.
All we have to do is double 111, right?
Right.
That's pretty awesome. Well, thank you for coming tonight. This story, when I was doing show prep, I was really got intrigued and was anxious to hear this story. It's kind of different, and I think it's very interesting that every time I think about you, I think about the story of John Nash, with his code breaking, even though some of it wasn't real.
Oh, right. Yeah,
but
he got creative.
I think about how it's kind of intriguing, and I always wondered how. And one thing I was hoping you could do. Well, first of all, if you don't mind, just giving just a quick background on yourself, so people will know, and whatever's related to this subject, and then give a very high level overview, because the story is it's not complicated, but it's involved, and I want people to kind of have an idea of where we're going, kind of roughly where we're going, because there's lots of rabbit holes you could go down on this thing. And I kind of found myself going down a few myself. So
yeah, every single one of the subjects that you touch upon in this adventure is kind of like an armchair adventure through a historical reference that relates to a mission that was taken in 1606 and 1607 into the land that was called Acadie at the time, which a lot of people call Acadia now, or New France, or mostly the region of New England. And what this was a group of international representatives of a Rosicrucian order that had taken a venture all the way across the Atlantic, because they were trying to meet with the Native American population and try and collect herbs and spices and all kinds of things that they were exploring the region with, as far as like trying to make a covenant with the natives, so that way they could come and travel and grow medicines. And this was all put into everything they collected was put into the fabled Voynich manuscript.
Is this after Columbus or before Columbus?
This is 1606, 1607. Okay. Yep. And those guys ended up having the abilities to collect and gather tons of different, I guess you can say, herbal remedies that they brought back with them, because there wasn't much in the way of modern medicine. So when they came on a mission, and they wanted to try and keep the faith of everything that their religious order was based upon. So they were looking to find those sacraments. They were looking to find those medicines. And when they documented everything, they encrypted it into the Voynich manuscript, which is a famous manuscript.
Let me ask you a question, though. This is one thing that's been bugging me. So you're saying that because I'm trying to understand what invoked you're saying that they were just on a typical mission, but how did they know what to look for?
Well, the Spanish and the French had already been working together on their expeditions to the regions, and they have been working for some time to map the entire globe. So by then, everything was kind of known that there were, native people that lived there. And at one point, they were kind of discussing what was going to happen in France, Spain, and Europe, because these kings were traditional. They had a noble kingdom and a noble order, but they were having trouble because the Catholics were invading every single country and trying to force subservience to some sort of, different religious order that was kind of foreign to them, because, it was in Latin, and it came from a different part of the world, and it just had a different cultural attachment.
Right, but what I'm trying to get to is that this particular story is about the search for almost not a holy grail, but for what? What is the search for?
Well, when they made their journey, they secretly were bringing the remnants, the remains of Jesus and Mary to the new world. And so what ends up happening is, shortly thereafterwards, someone tries to kill King James in the Gunpowder Plot. They try and blow up Parliament. and they almost wiped away the entire kingdom that wrote the Bible. And then
So,
right before that happened, somebody assassinated King Henry over this.
when you say remains,
yeah,
we Christians believe that Jesus was risen from the grave and ascended into heaven. What do you mean remains?
Well, I mean, every embodiment has physical weight to it, right? So you have bones, you have relics, you have things that he was wrapped in, his shrouds and everything like that was interred in France at a certain point, because they had discovered, this was well known in English lore and history dating back to 100 AD, when Jesus had made his mission to the Welsh countryside and left evidence there. They made an entire manual about it, and that's like,
what year was that?
The manual was made in 100 AD, and it was about Jesus having pilgrimage there to that land shortly after the crucifixion was supposed to have happened. But then it talked about the real information about the crucifixion, and it said, which is spoken in the Bible. And you don't see that in the Catholic Bibles, the New International Version, but in the King James Version, it clearly states that they had chosen a martyr to take Jesus's place on the cross, because when they went to look for him to crucify him, he could not be found. He had disappeared with Mary.
Oh, wait a minute.
And so he escaped the crucifixion because Judas had brought him the knowledge that they were looking for him. And so they convened over the Last Supper, and then he decided to make his way, and the apostles stayed to carry on the gospel. And so
Are you saying that whose version of the story has Jesus not being crucified? Because that's kind of strange.
That is the King James Version of the Bible, shows that the crucified man was named Simon of Cyrene. Now, here's the thing.
There were two, robbers or whatever, criminals on either side of Jesus.
Right.
I mean, but you understand the whole Christianity as a whole is based solely on the crucifixion of Jesus.
That is the Catholic. I'm telling you honestly, that is the Catholic.
No, it's the Protestant belief also. It's not
because there was a mystery that was passed at a certain time in the Bible that was left as a story to be told by the sublime prince with the greatest royal secret. And in those manuals, it talked about all of the information that was needed for this prince to maintain his status and to become King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And they talked about all of this going on in the Masonic works and the Masonic side of everything. But all the overwhelming influence of religion that, cast its, decisions and made orders, and, anybody who moved against this sort of order, they would kill them off. And this was the blasphemy that the Rosicrucians were persecuted.
Pretty much blasphemy.
But it isn't. It's the historical fact. And when you go to the Christian Quarter, when you walk through the courtyard, there's an arch right before you get to the area, and it has the name Simon of Cyrene right across the arch. And he is the individual that was chosen to take the place of Jesus, because it said they chose a martyr and whipped him, a martyr to carry the cross.
The martyr carried the cross to Golgotha, but Jesus was crucified on the cross.
That's what they say. But
that's what the Bible says.
Right. But
now,
of course,
don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not trying to ruin your story.
It's not even that. I
want people to understand that as a Christian, I have, you have certain beliefs, and then this story is another story. It's
not so much a belief, it was a discovery, because I saw so much early on in my life. I was like, this is improper. I was like, there's something wrong about this story. It just didn't fit with all the statements that were made. I was like, who wrote this? And you could see that it was there had been many versions that had been written, but when you take it back to the King James version of the Bible, the original one made in like 1618 or 1620, all the information is there.
I'm reading Mark 15 right now, and when the 6th hour was
You have
come,
to
when the
open the
darkness
book.
was
You
over.
have to open the physical book, because what you're reading is the historical references that have been written down based upon the numerous editions that have been made over a period of time to bring, quote unquote, the story of Christ to a zenith based upon the many different influences and arguments. But that was all, I swear to God, it was all influence. Where does religion come from now? It comes from the Vatican.
You better get right with God. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, the Shinto religion has
The whole purpose of the whole
gods. So
purpose of the Christian faith is that Jesus was crucified and died for our sins. That's the whole religion in a nutshell.
right, but then
It's
you
not that
open the
he went
book of
off and
but then you open the book of Revelations and you see so many cryptic things in it. You're like, what do all these cryptic things mean? So in reality,
I'll stop bothering you with that.
no, that's
I
a
want
good
people to
explanation.
understand that I'm, as a Christian, this is
I know.
this is our faith, right? Our faith is based on the crucifixion of Jesus.
Great story, bro. Great story. I got a better one for you. So
No,
go to the books of Revelations. Go to the books of Revelations and open those up and begin to talk.
I know, but you just can't do. You can't just ignore Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the story of the crucifixion.
Why don't you go to Revelations? Go to the Revelations.
I mean, I'm having a good time discussing it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those, Jesuits that's going to whack you because you said the wrong thing.
I know, right? Go to Revelations where it talks about the golden angel and
what verses?
Well, there's quite a few verses because it carries on with a story, and the story is completely cryptic. So you have to be able to interpret the golden angel. The golden angel descends with the key, and the name of the golden angel is Alpha and Omega. That's all you're told. And then it continues on with other parts of the storyline, which are descriptive of a code and a cipher that we're going to run into along this journey that we're going to take in the show. And so at that point, you have a guide and that's what the Bible is used for, right? To guide you to your revelations, to your discoveries, to your knowledge.
Well, I mean, yeah, Revelation is supposed to have, sort of be, the Bible is a linear thing, I mean, the Revelation is the story of, the end times and the return of Jesus. But the reason Jesus is going to return is because he was crucified and, went into and ascended to heaven.
It's a good story, isn't it?
Well, you stop saying it's a good story.
Right. So there's the one pope, and he goes, "The myth of Christ has served us well," right? And he was.
What are you talking about?
There was a pope back in the day. If you just type in in quotes, "The myth of Christ has served us well,"
you gotta understand that. Yeah, but they also believe that Mary is the intercessory or whatever. I mean, you got to understand that Christians, especially Southern Christians, don't give a darn about what the Pope says. Right? He is not. The Pope is. The Pope is.
Funny? I thought so too, and because my grandfather attended the Church of Christ, and he has the same. He's in Tennessee, right? So he has the same gospels that you speak of. But then when I showed them all of this, they were like, "My God," And I said, "Did you know that the Church of Christ was founded by the Jesuits, by the Catholics, and it was their way of convincing the Southerners how to take part in their rhetoric of their obedience, their lessons of obedience?" It was.
I'll start talking about Southerners now that way.
Well, like I said, we will find common ground on this documentary because it's fascinating to me, and it was of a discovery, and it kind of reinstilled my faith that the order of the Helm that had brought all the people here under the colonies, it came here first to inter this great religious secret in a vault in the side of the cliff. And that's what you see there is an unfinished pyramid with a keyhole shape. And if you see it's got a keyhole shape in it, that means this is part of the great mystery, and it relates directly to the golden angel.
Which one of those photographs is it? This one?
No. Well, no. It's the one with the vault, the actual vault that's situated in the mountains. It's on my avatar right now. I made it my main
Oh, I thought I had copied all the pictures.
Yeah, I checked that and I was like, you know what? Those are the pictures that relate to the second leg of the journey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're giving them a tease. This is that.
Oh,
See,
no.
Wait. Go back up. That one right there, where it's got that. That's the keystone that relates to the Book of Revelations, that relates to the actual cipher that is shown in the photograph list that I sent to you for the show. So when you see that, right there, you've got basically a word that has been added, and you can kind of see there's an arrow at the base of it curving over, right? So you got an
H. Is this eight? What is this figure? It looks like an H and then a
H plus O.
O.
You're playing a game of horse, right? H O, and then what is the next letter underneath it? It looks like a P, doesn't it?
P, yeah.
So if you're going to hop to the east, that's HOPE, and now you've got hope, because that's found on Oak Island at the top of the money pit. So if you're digging in the money pit, you're not going to find it, right? But if you interpret the key and everything that's inside of it, then it gives you hope, because you hop to the east. And then you take a look at the actual code and cipher and how it breaks down, and you're amazed when you see how it works, because those symbols right there are from the Spanish order. Those are actually in Spanish.
Well, let me ask you this. I kind of interrupted you with the Jesus thing, but
it's cool.
At what point of the story does this stone, because these people, are you saying that they left these symbols on a path to where they were hiding the remains?
Yes, because they were creating a journey and they wanted you to follow the journey through a map, and they hid a map inside of a painting. And so what you were supposed to do is here's the overview. A priest had found some ciphers that were inside. They were made of parchment, and the priest had found ciphers inside of a church when he was renovating the church. And he also had kicked some gravel into a kind of like a grate, and underneath the grate was like a tunnel that went down, and he could hear the rocks going down to like a echo chamber beneath it. So when he was doing all the work and he was, researching what is this church, because he just got transferred there, and he was like, oh, this place is beat up, we're gonna have to clean it up and renovate it, right? So he went through the whole process, and they excavated this in the 1900s, and he apparently found a chamber underneath an emptied chamber that had 2 slabs of like stone that were set up, and like a couple of pillars that were set up next to it, and that were holding up an arch above it, and the room was empty. And when he went to renovate the rest of the church, he basically relaid the floor over all of it, and did a bunch of ornate stuff inside of there, built a cipher on the outside of the doorway. And what ends up happening is you run into this priest who's apparently deciphered these parchments, and he's helped to accentuate part of the mystery by continuing and adding to it, creating more ciphers, more challenges, more descriptive parts of the quest that you're supposed to take. And that's how you're supposed to literally find Jesus.
So well, yeah, that's your version of the story.
And when you add
I'm trying to keep on this, because
right.
I'm trying to not keep on it. I'm trying to understand like the big picture here, where who was it that actually, like in the beginning, who are you saying brought the remains to America?
That was a gentleman named Samuel Champlain. Now when back in the late 1590s, King Henry was excavating the church because the Catholics were taking over. So he sent his men to excavate here, and they found the remains that they knew about. And so they turned around and sent a messenger to go grab Samuel Champlain, who was in the Gulf of Mexico with the Spanish explorer.
How did they know those were the remains of Jesus?
Because the regents of France were the direct descendants of Jesus and Mary's children. So after Jesus came there and the kingdom was established in France over a period of time, all the regions of France that originated the foundation of the unification of the kingdom of France were and that's the greatest royal secret of the French Masons.
How does this tie in with the Shroud of Turin?
The shroud was in France. It was possessed by a family called the Duchesne family. And when they returned the shroud showed that it had been stitched together at a certain point to hold it together after it had been picked up. So the original crusade was only 9 people. The first crusade was to obtain the remnants of all of these artifacts that were buried under the old temple in Jerusalem. So in order for Dagobert, who's French, that was the first crusade, Dagobert II and his men all carried through the Holy Land, only 9 men, and they basically just collected all the goods, and then a few of them stayed behind to study, and then the other men brought all of them back, but they distributed amongst they had distributed all of these artifacts amongst the regents of the times, and different high-ranking French families were entrusted with holding one piece of this great mystery, this puzzle. And so in order to unite the kingdom if you really knew what you were doing, you would know where all of these things were. No, they didn't want imposters who had heard the story. So what they had done was they had passed it down amongst themselves and kept that greatest royal secret to themselves. So,
if he wasn't crucified, how did he die?
Well, he traveled. He died of natural causes. He had children. He had children.
You just blew 400 million people's religion out the door.
He had children in France with Mary, and those children became the regents of France. That's why the Catholics that's why they killed King Henry, to end that blood lineage, so the Catholics could then reign as the sovereign from Rome. But that was
kind of funny is that
wasn't where they were born. That wasn't where Jesus was born.
You snuck this in. I didn't see all this in the show prep.
It's cool.
I'm just kidding. I'm not. Any Christian that has real faith is not going to be threatened by any kind of story like this. But it's interesting to hear, because the fact is that we don't have. I would have much rather have you said something like talking about the life of Jesus, the first 33 years, and not this. If you told me he used to go bass fishing, when he was 20, that would have been okay.
Well, if I told you that today is Revelations 22 verse 2 day, and that Jesus had an anointing oil with him that was made of cannabis, and that he had traveled to the Asian, he traveled to Kashmir, to India, and that's where he learned from the ascended masters how to heal people using the anointed oil that was already used for hundreds of years there.
222 or 22:2?
Revelations 22 verse 2.
Okay, 22:2.
Yep.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to pull it
these
up.
are revelations. These are things that Bacon wanted them shared, but he wanted them discussed during the mystery, so you could see the verification of it, so you could see for yourself your own independent investigation of truth. He wanted people to know. Bacon was a part of advancing the science of knowledge of everything that he created, everything in ciphers that he created. He encrypted in a book called The Advancement of Learning, which is really, really cool.
So down the middle of the street of the city, on each side of the river, stood the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the
healing of the nations.
So is that the right verse?
That's absolutely correct. And if you were ever to change that verse, it would incite a holy war amongst all the Coptics in Ethiopia, against all the Christians in Italy, and if they ever took that sacrament from life itself, it would be bringing death to the world. And so those who have tried to take that knowledge have also tried to omit that knowledge from people and tried to remove that. Jesus was a sage. He was a very powerful, he was a medicine man. And
how does that verse tie into what we were talking about, though? What's the symbol?
If you say on both sides of the city street, what street is it? You know, so you got to find down the middle of the street of the city. Well, they built Burlington, Vermont, based exactly on these prophetic studies, and at the top of it was the Masonic temples on the left, and on the direct top of it is a church, which is a Unitarian church, which believes in the unification of all the sect and all of the gospels. You know, they want to collect all the wisdom and the knowledge and bring it together so people can see it and enjoy that celebration. That's how Burlington was founded. They call it the Queen City of the Republic for which it stands, you know, or which the United States stands. Because Vermont was the 14th Republic. They didn't even want to join the Union, but they were kind of forced to, because if they didn't make a declaration of their lands, what the boundaries were, it was going to be annexed by New York or annexed by New Hampshire. They were both saying, oh, just give it to us. And Vermonters were the only, you know, they were the Frenchmen. They were like, oh, no, you know, because they knew of the great mystery of the exploration of Samuel Champlain. And that was the story that we were talking about earlier, was how King Henry called his men and sent for his best captain, Samuel Champlain. And then they went and picked up Francis Bacon, carrying with them David Teniers and Nicolas Poussin, who were master artisans of the Romantic era of the Rosicrucian order in France. And so having all of that founded, it helped influence, it romanticized everything in the Bible. And that's where things became more of the Passion of Christ. And because this was an international movement, it didn't just have France and England and Scotland and Ireland involved. It also had an Italian map maker, and it also had an entire series of ships from Portugal and from Spain. There was something like a fleet of 18 ships that had left on the order of the Helm. So when they showed up in Acadia, there's a story about them in the native lore called The Adventures of Glooskap. And Glooskap is known to the Micmac tribes as being a traveler that showed up in white garb with a cross, a red cross on it. And so that's where all the stories come from, saying, oh, the Knights Templar were in Nova Scotia in the 1300s. The Knights Templar were long gone. And so what they did was to relive everything that had happened and why they were shunned and why they were called heretics, was because they knew the truth of what was going on, and that they were part of the international monetary system that was being created between the kingdoms. So obviously when, the French king got a little bit greedy, he wanted to take control over their wealth. So in order to kind of reminisce over all of this, they adorned themselves afterwards they were called the Knights of Christ. The Knights Templar became the Knights of the Christ, or the poor men. I forget how it's actually spoken, but it's like the poor Knights of Christ is the way it is spoken. And they gave up all their wealth just so that way they could go on a mission at that point, because they realized the wealth that they had at that time had burdened them and made them a target for all the greed and avarice from the
So you're saying Bacon and Champlain went on this together?
Yes. And there was a time when Bacon was missing from his whole timeline of events. And when he made it to the New World, he is kind of idolized. And the thing is Samuel Champlain, the images of him that were drawn look totally different from what they say he looks like. And when you see the image of the individual that they draw up saying, oh, this is what Champlain looks like, every single one of them, as compared to Francis Bacon, are an exact match. And it's because Bacon was leading his Order of the Helm in Vermont. When they got into Lake Champlain, they stopped in certain locations and talked with the natives, and they created a place in they call it the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, which is in the northeast corner where all the native tribes had gathered together around like a certain area up there, and so they commissioned the building of a city called St. Albans, which is Francis Bacon's birthplace, and then to the south of that they created Burlington, and they have a central street on it. And
what do you mean it's his birthplace? I thought he was.
Oh no, he was born in England, but a place called St. Albans. So they commissioned.
Oh, okay.
They dedicated that because that's when Francis Bacon brought the ideals of the kingdom and met with the Native Americans, saying, "Hey, let's organize together and be more productive." You know, so they encourage them to start farming and getting into harvesting crops to be sold to other nations of surplus.
Listen, what I'm trying to do is, if we can, I keep sidetracking this, but if we can like keep on that sort of high level story level where they go here, they go here, they go there, they do this, they do that, and then they go, because I'm having a hard time tracking the when they left Europe and when they got here and where did they specifically about this story, when did they hid the remains here, why, that kind of thing, and why they hid the remains here.
Oh, it was such an impressive place. The Spanish knew it, and they called it Tanto Montana, which means so much mountain. And then there's another place in the West in the superstitions called Montana Tanto. So on the Spanish coronation sword of kings, they have both of those phrases, Montana Tanto and Tanto Montana.
Where is this though? Where?
This is called the Pass in Stowe. You might remember it from the Liberty Bell. When the Masons created the Liberty Bell, they wanted it to ring sound.
Geographically, where is it located?
In Vermont, in about the center of the state. There's a city called Stowe, Vermont, Stowe, and that's the city or the small town that's beneath the mountain pass. So there are the names Pass and Stowe, but it's like John Pass and John Stowe were their names, but it's really like John Doe. You see what I mean? Like it's an illusion. Those weren't actually their names. They were kind of moniker names that were created to encrypt the location of this place. So again, there's been numerous successive groups that have come through and tried to accentuate this one location. And it wasn't just because of its immeasurable wealth as a Spanish mining location back in the day. It actually became a location where they kind of ceremoniously placed the remains of Jesus in a tomb, and they crafted so many beautiful pieces of rock art, petroglyphs, biblical passages, works of Shakespeare were used to encrypt it. The tomb of Shakespeare, all the ciphers that are on his epitaph, and everything that dates back to the time of the Rosicrucians was all used to encrypt this. Even Paul Cézanne, which is a later Romantic era realist, he ended up putting together kind of like a missing piece of the puzzle that had been put together. And so he took kind of like an image of the location from a point of view, and then basically crafted, and we're going to go through this whole place or all of this in the next episode. But, he was able to replicate the exact likeness of all the stones, the shapes, even little small boulders.
Are you talking about like on parchment or something?
He created a painting, and Paul Cézanne, and in decorating that whole illusion around what was going on, he created kind of a picture of the capstone, a triangular pyramidal stone that's about 13 feet high that was carved and placed right in the center of the valley in the mountain pass.
And what year was it supposedly that they placed the remains there?
1606 and 1607. And again, I am the only person to be able to break these ciphers, and I'm the first person to find this location. So you haven't seen any remain. You haven't been inside where the remains are yet, right? I can't tell you that.
Are you serious?
I'm not allowed to tell you that. They'll kick me out. They'll say you're no longer the sublime prince with the greatest royal secret. I was born in Princeton, Tony, in Princeton, New Jersey. Think about that. Washington's last battle before he became president was in Princeton. So my dad's the first president of the Boy Scout Explorers. I was nominated for the Green Party, which was called the Earth Club back then, as being the vice president of high school. So we took trips and adventures and went out to the woods. And I was teamed up with kind of a very steadfast Christian fellow who was interested in guiding a lot of church groups and a lot of people into the woods to teach them about the nativity, because the nativity was our sanctuary. And he wanted to make that nativity part of his teaching, of his gospel, so people could find an escape from all the troubles in the world and find solace in nature. And that is the beauty of what I was raised up, being taught of the allegory behind the Bible and what all of these things mean, because Jesus obviously, had to be born in the manger. They say there was no space in the hotel or whatever, but in reality, I know that they were trying to escape the wrath of those who were seeking him out.
Right.
And they knew that he was to be born because he was a great prophet born at a certain calendar date, at a certain time period. I mean, we see it as a pivotal point between BC and AD, but in reality, the Masons don't see that. They see a continual timeline of 5,000 years of history dating back to the Egyptian pyramids and their heresy. So they know that there's, at 1400 BC is 9 o'clock on the clock, okay? And then at 686 BC, and that's the Egyptian time clock at 1400 BC. It's kind of like the Antikythera device, but it was called the Egyptian time clock. It was a different device. You can look that up. But then 686 BC was when Jesus was, or Siddhartha Gautama, a prince in India, was born, and he gave up his kingdom for the glory of spiritual transcendence. And then when Jesus was born, he traveled to the land of Siddhartha and learned of the meditations, the prayers, and all the healing. So now you're at a pivotal point where you have 1400 at 9 o'clock, then 686, which is 10:30, whatever on his angle. And then you have 686 AD, which is the birth of Muhammad. And it's how did Siddhartha and Muhammad end up being on both sides of the prophet Jesus without the recognition of these things? And then you also have Da Vinci, and Da Vinci is 1400 AD. So here you have a perfect clock that's created, and it's a symbolic kind of, center point in a wheel where you have rays coming off, and the symmetry of it is just so perfect that has to be some kind of timing involved in all of this. And that's what the Indians believe, that, in India, the Bhagavad Gita speaks about every 100 years, a universal monarch is born, and every 1,000 years, a Buddha is born, and every 100,000 years, the world comes to a total state of enlightenment, which is called a cyclic uproar, when the cycle has become full circle. And so you have to go through all of these studies of the Egyptian, Siddhartha, then you get to the point of Jesus, then you get to Muhammad, then you get to Da Vinci, and every 100 years after that, you have a succession of prophets or god kings that are there with great councils. And so at that point, that's when the high councils become enlightened, which is what Bacon and Queen Elizabeth were hoping for, to bring forth that age of enlightenment to the world. But they knew that they couldn't do this. That's part of what they call the mystery behind the Rosicrucians, and why they were hated so much, is because they were literally an all science kind of group. They were collecting all the documents and everything that they could archive to create these, great halls and libraries for teachings. And that's where the advancement of learning came from with Bacon. He was trying to teach as much as possible in his lifetime, but he knew that there was going to be a problem with all this. And surely enough, they killed King Henry, and they tried to blow up all of Parliament over all this. I mean, you can imagine how it would really upset a lot of the diehards.
So
You're a kid who shows up with a Burger King crown on, and you're like, oh yeah, Jesus didn't die on the cross, by the way. He's up here in Vermont. That would upset a lot of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways it doesn't make any sense, but
the Burger King crown does make sense,
No, I mean the fact that I don't know why his remains would have been brought here, when
because they wanted to hide. They wanted to hide it. Okay, now his remains were brought here, but Mary's were brought to another place, and that's the Masonic secret, the greatest Masonic secret that they speak about. So, what is the greatest, I guess you can say, saying that the Masons live by? As above, as it is below.
Yeah.
And you've heard of that before.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can find Jesus, you can find Mary too. Okay.
The thing about it is, well,
I've already been here to this location, and you had asked me had I been inside and found remains, right?
Yeah.
That was the unfinished question that we overlooked, and I jokingly with you said I could not tell you, and I said, well, to be honest with you, I cannot tell a lie. Somebody else was already there before me and created the Liberty Bell. Do you see? And they were the Masons before me, who came before me.
Are you saying someone's already taken the remains
and hid them?
So this is another quest.
I can take you to this place and teach you of the history of it, but I cannot physically find these remains because they were hidden from the masses of people by the Freemasons who showed up here. And I mean, it's as clear as day. Why would they create the Liberty Bell and then put this symbolism on it? And if you can throw up can you put up that picture of the Great Seal on the dollar bill that I showed you? If you can post that will show more of the proof of what I'm speaking about. It's not on that page.
Oh man, what did I used it as the thumbnail, right?
Yeah, it's your thumbnail for the show.
There's a link here somewhere to that.
It's an email. It's like an email that I sent you. It should be on the last email.
Well, let me go. Let me remove this, and then I'll try to find it right quick.
Cool.
What was I going to ask you? Oh darn it! I was going to ask you a question, and then we got off on that.
Said, do I like Burger King French toast?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I like Burger King.
No, I was going to say, is there anything besides? Are there any other hints that normal people could look to? I mean,
no. Yeah, I'm not a normal person. I'm very curious. Okay,
I don't mean you're not normal. I just meant what I meant is that we have a lot of history. We have a lot written down, and there's no history. There's no written history of, I mean, the only written history Christians have is the Bible, and the Bible says that he was crucified and placed in the tomb. And 3 days later, he was resurrected.
Right, he rose.
That whole story is in the Bible, so that's Christianity.
Here's what happened: they martyred Simon of Cyrene, and at a certain point, he collapsed on the cross. He was passed out, so they brought him down, thinking he was dead. And this was Longitus. Longitus brought him down from the cross, who was a Roman, who felt compassion for him and said, okay, he's suffered enough. Let's bring him down. So when they buried him, a man gave him a tomb, his family tomb to use. I forget the guy's name. It had a big round kind of like wheel, like door to it. And they placed him inside of it and wrapped him in the shroud, as it says. And that after 3 days, he's gone or whatever. People, when they go through a tragic experience, they go into a state of shock, they pass out, right? And so he was unconscious, but then they placed him in there and he regained consciousness, and he's like, he's not.
Are you talking about Jesus or the other?
Simon of Cyrene, who was martyred in place of Jesus, was placed into a tomb where he was wrapped in the shroud. They were thinking he was dead.
People knew who Jesus was and what he looked like. It wasn't like you could just.
Well, let's put it this way.
I mean,
I was told that he got on a boat and he basically hightailed it through the Mediterranean, landed on the coast of the shores of France, and which he went and settled in this area called Rennes Le Chateau, which is present day Rennes Le Chateau. But then he left Mary there when he went on a pilgrimage to the north to inform all the other people about what was going on in Rome and Jerusalem, so that way they knew to be aware of what was going on. That was why Jesus went on these missions to these locations in Europe, and why these documents. There's a book written in the Druidic text from 100 AD. I don't know the name of it. I'll look for it. But it's hard to find online. But it talks about the pilgrimage that Christ made to the English countryside and the Welsh, on the west side, as he journeyed by boat across the channel. And but that was him back in the day. And it's like, how did he get there if he was on a journey all the way, with the three magi out west or to the east, the far east, to learn about the anointing oil? Because when he returned, he was a young man, but he had been there some time. He must have been there 5 or 6 years, because it says that the magi picked him up when he was young, real young. And then when he went there, he was raised up, and then he returned. So he's basically like a Hindu ascetic, a Sufi. And that's how the Muslims know Jesus as a Sufi, because that's the story that is told about him. And those are all medicine tribes, people who studied of the sacrament, which is just cannabis, And so, without all the stories aside, our original, not argument, but confusion between stories was that Jesus rose from the grave. Well, he was brought from the cross in reality. And the stories that are taught is the teaching of metaphysics and spirituality about how his soul and his spirit rose at that time period after death, and he became a heavenly spirit. That's the truth. That is true, but it's told in a metaphysical kind of sense as opposed to the physical. So the physical story is about the discovery of the physical remains and the story behind. They didn't want the Catholics to forget about everything and just try and rewrite the story. But they had noticed that those things were going on, because then they tried to say that Jesus was the king of their kingdom, and that the Romans were, and the Roman Catholics were the inherent of that right. And so when they were taking over, all these kings felt like, oh, why should we have to pay homage to them? Like, we don't pay homage to the Romans, why should we pay homage to the Roman Catholics? There were so many confusions going on at the time, and that people talked about the insurgencies and the influences that are coming on. So I know that by telling the story, it creates what's called a schism, right? You know what a schism is, right?
It's an issue.
It's a shift. No, it's a shift. It's kind of like where everyone has like to kind of restudy things, because then it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, but the schism itself is like it's caused by sort of an uproar, right? Or it's like right now you're causing a schism amongst Christians.
No, it's just you and me here, and that's what a schism is. Literally between two differentiating. It's a split between that. There's one consciousness that they all follow, that they are of one mind, as Bacon speaks of. But then causing a schism is because there's a differentiating opinion between the two. But then you're supposed to use factual evidence to kind of solve that.
The thing about it is,
those are the scientific methods that are used. But the thing is everyone's just saying, oh, there's no reason to tell this story. And I look at it saying, it's not to cause a schism. It's in the book of Revelations. And so therefore, it's supposed to be something that is discovered and something that you seek, that you look for, that they literally told you, boy, you better go find Jesus. So from here, I got to go stare at some picture of George Washington and ask him a bunch of questions and be like, all right, where did you put the bones, bro? Where did you hide all this stuff? And he won't ever tell you. Because he was a sublime prince too, you see. He was part of an order that held of a lineage, and that sort of thing carries on with the roots of the people that are born in Princeton. Like it's a colonial township. I gotta be honest with you. It's a different feel and a different place than even if you go down to Alexandria in Virginia, which is really colonial and really, like old school back in the early 1700s onwards, it's totally different than Princeton. Princeton just has its own kind of realm to it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And all this knowledge is there too.
Yeah, I understand, but there is, just like there's a doctrine for Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism, right?
Right.
You don't argue with those doctrine.
Oh no,
right? The doctrine of Christianity is this basically right here. You have the creation story, you have the fall of man in the garden, you have the life of Jesus, the teachings, the crucifixion, the resurrection,
right,
salvation, right? This is
Christianity
in a nutshell.
That's called the Word of God, right? Which is the word that was written during the meditations that the people who wrote the Bible and the older scripts had created. But it took an interpretation of that to be able to write it into our
That's not the doctrine of the church.
What I'm saying is
that's your interpretation. That's not
everything that you're speaking of comes from an English language. And then those things that we are speaking about in the English language had to be interpreted from a foreign language.
That's the way you interpret it. It's not the doctrine of the church. I think Angelina and I were going to do a show on this very thing.
The church in Rome refuses to accept this exists, and that's why they shun the Freemasons, because they know the truth.
The church in Rome refuses what?
The church in Rome, the Catholic Church, refuses to accept this in their doctrines.
Except what? What you're saying?
Okay, so they judge over you, but then they said Jesus died for your sins. Jesus didn't die for my sins if they're judging over you.
But that is the doctrine of Christianity, that he died for our sins. That is the very basic. That's Christianity in a little nutshell, that Jesus died for our sins. That's what Christianity is. The Christ died. Christianity, Christ. Christianity, Christ.
No, it's a story about the life of Christ, but there are many things that Christ had in his life that are examples that are supposed to be taught to the followers of the biblical faith, which is of many books. The word Bible comes from the word biblios, which means many books, which were written in a foreign language to all of us and had to be interpreted by King James's gospel, or his group called the Rosicrucians, who wrote the Bible that we read and know. But at a certain point, all of that got changed, and the inflection that was added was generalized. I don't like the very generalized.
You know why the Mormons had to create their own religion? Because they thought Jesus came to America. They claimed
the hidden treasure. Yeah, I know it well.
Yeah. Okay, so they created their own religion, and that's what you must do.
No,
if you don't, if the story that you're telling is not Christianity, it's all I'm saying. I'm saying factually,
historical and factual information that is left behind that was encrypted by the Rosicrucians.
There's nothing mysterious. There's no secrets about Christianity. There's nothing that is hidden or mysterious about Christianity.
The golden angel descends.
Jesus came.
The golden angel
descends. If you profess that, then you can.
And the golden angel puts the key into that little vault and turns the key, and out comes all the information. That is the key to that vault, is that revelation that's spoken in the Bible. Why would he specifically cut and carve an unfinished vault entrance that is 150 feet off the ground in the side of a cliff?
You're talking about carving.
Champlain and his whole order with Bacon and their masons, they came here with 18 ships in a story that's told about them landing in Nova Scotia. And at that point, it's told because he explored all of Vermont during this time period, and that the marks of Francis Bacon's name. All right, you see my avatar right there?
Yeah.
on that right side, you see where it kind of looks like there's no ice or snow or dark color. It's a lighter color rock, and it looks like it's kind of like got a little curved line to it, kind of like an overhang.
Do I have that picture on here? I thought I had that.
Yeah, you never loaded that one picture.
Okay, it's kind of hard to see in your little thumbnail.
Yeah. Go to the vault.
It's not this.
No, that's one of the lower caves that they carved. That's part of the strategy that you have to plot out to get to it. That's the shape of a pawn that is created. So if you can pull up that one picture from the email I sent you, it'll show you the Great Seal of the dollar bill. And you'll see the two parts of the puzzle that are built into it. And that those two parts are part of the journey, that you have a two-part journey to make. And so it's both. You have to have both sides of the coin, as they would say, to be able to have that ability to solve the puzzle. So many people have tried to claim, one or another thing is, related to the Great Seal, but nobody's been able to actually lock down two physical locations that were created out of stone based upon a great mystery of the Bible that leads to the pass in Stowe. Above Stowe, Vermont. It's irrefutable when you have all the evidence lined up for you. And so that's the beauty of this discovery. And to see why they made so much of an objective to get to it, the final statement in the parchment when it's translated from its original Latin is, "And he is there dead." That's what it says. And he is there dead.
I'm trying to open up this picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're talking about Jesus. It's so beautiful to see this.
All right, let me hold on. Let me get rid of.
I know.
I gotta be careful. The last time I did this, I closed out the dang show accidentally. What in the world? That ended quickly. Let's see. So. Here we go. Can you see that?
There you go. Yeah, kind of zoom crop that in if you can, just.
Which one, up here?
Or just crop the whole thing so all you're seeing is the vault itself.
Oh, here, okay.
Yeah, and so you can see it's a keyhole shape, as clear as day, and it's an unfinished pyramid on the outside of the entrance. So that's the Masonic lore that's in the symbol that's above it. So if you scroll the pic down, you'll get to see all of that there in the one side of the seal, Novus Ordo Seclorum. That means new order of the ages, which means it's supposed to be kind of like an ageless beginning of a new foundation and a capstone of an all-seeing, all-knowing individual. And that would be the individual called George Washington, who was supposed to be the incarnate. He knew every part of this. They traveled to France, and they basically studied with the French Masons, who kind of filled them in on a few things. But I know for a fact that he never really spoke about any of this in any of his journals.
Yeah, he would have got in big trouble.
Well, he was already in big trouble because obviously the church and the kingdom of England was Catholic at the time. Under the kings. Well, they say they are, but to be honest with you, they really appreciate the foundation of the Protestant. And when they say Protestant, it's they're Protestant. They're Protestant against the Catholic Church version of the story of Jesus's life, because they feel that it's important to know the truth, but at the same time believe in his existence, that he transcended to a high spiritual state to become an omnipotent spirit, one that could be invoked by the Christians and one that could be kept close. But at the same time, they also knew that you had your own ability to transcend, and that you could become wise and enlightened, and that you could become one with Jesus's path and study with him. And walk with Jesus. Don't say that Jesus is the highest of gods and idolize him and everything, because what's the last word in the Bible? It's Amen, which is an Egyptian god. And so they're praying to the keeper of eternity, the supreme architect, Ra, And, all of the gods, amen, together, saying, their piece has been said. Please keep the record, da 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 da. It's the way that things work in their, I guess you can say, their ceremonial rite. And the first Bible that came out was nothing but masonry. It was all masonry, the first Bible. And King James got it from Francis Bacon, and he looked at it and he was like, all right, go back and rewrite this. Because he was like, it was just all like, secret handshakes. All the secret handshakes of the Masonic Bible were in it. It was like, what is this? So he made Bacon kind of go rewrite it. Bacon went back. He was with the Bible for a year. This is, the history of how the Bible was written in the kingdom. And all of that came together under kind of like a final, decision. And they agreed to just publish. But at that time, like, William Shakespeare had died in like 1616, but in his works that they came out after he was dead, like 1623, it was kind of like how did this guy ghostwrite everything? Like obviously somebody wrote the works of Shakespeare, and obviously the same mysteries that are in the Bible and Revelations are found detailed with the physical maps and the encryption of like degrees of travel and like measurements, and like everything that you need is in the works of Shakespeare as well. But the Bible hints at it and gives you kind of missing keys. So like what you can't find in the works of Shakespeare, you end up finding in the Bible that helps you break the hardest parts.
What is that little church in, is it Northern Africa that supposedly houses the Holy Grail, or
it's the Ark of the Covenant, but it was one of the copies that was made of the original. So what happened was when they got to Jerusalem with it, they settled down there and they started to worship because it was a religious center. And it was before the holy quarters were set up for the 4 different Armenian, Christian, Islamic, and all that stuff hadn't even started yet. But so while they were there, they went and they buried the ark and then built their kingdom upon that kind of site of worship. And then Solomon had 2 copies made, one for each of his sons, and he was trying to spread the word of the kingdom. So he sent Menelik to the south, and that's where Menelik ended up in Ethiopia, and that's how they gained control and watch over a. Because
are you saying that you think that the Ark is under the Temple Mount?
According to even the Masonic stuff, and when we get into part 2 of this documentary, there's a carving that's on the waterfront. It's about maybe like 4 feet, 6 feet tall, and 8 feet wide, and it's an entire. It's like literally the Ark of the Covenant as was taken from the Egyptians by Moses, as it is described in the Bible. You'll see it plain as day. And when the ark is taken, it's taken and buried, and then they built the Temple Mount upon that.
Wait a minute, the ark was built to house the 10 Commandments.
No, the ark was built by the Pharaoh, and it was kept in the Temple of Philae. And what it was it kept 2 urns, and one urn was filled with manna, which is mushrooms, and the other one was cannabis. And no, listen, those are the original. Hold on.
You're just ignoring all the Bible stories.
Well, yeah, because you're not letting me finish the story, are you?
Well.
And we're talking about before Christ and before the Bible was a guy named Moses in the Old Testament who fled from the Pharaoh. Right. And the Pharaoh, Ramses II, chased him with all his men. He went to the Reed Sea, up by the north where the marshes are at in the delta, and he crossed at that point at low tide, and by the time that the Pharaoh came and followed him, high tide swallowed them up. And so they weren't able to. So you don't
believe the story about the parting of the Red Sea? You don't believe the Bible story about Moses parting the Red Sea?
It's kind of like a map. Yeah, they're mapping the direction of the locations.
Why is it? I don't understand why. I mean, I can It would almost be better for you if you incorporated the Bible instead of like bucking every story in the Bible. Right?
No, there's a real side to everything, and then there's an actual kind of allegorical tale that's told that has meaning to it, that is supposed to add additional spiritual meaning to it. Right.
But
So,
when you
so he's telling you,
when you say
don't
low
try and,
tide and high
okay.
tide, that
So on to
that
the
kind of
story of
negates
Moses. On to
the
the story of
miracle.
Moses.
You know,
He gets Moses, and he wanders the desert for 40 years,
right?
and he gets to a place called Jabal al-Lawz, which is in present-day Saudi Arabia, a blacktop mountain. Because he just said he crossed the Red Sea. What's across the Red Sea? Jabal al-Lawz. And so now he's there in that land, and he takes the manna and he makes the manna, right? Which it says in the Bible, Moses prepared the manna,
Right.
and the manna was inside the ark. And then he takes out the Egyptian books of the dead and he puts in the 10 Commandments because he went to go speak with his God. And that is his God that he went to speak with, his higher self that he went to speak with. Because then Moses became that living God king of his people, but he used the ark and the covenant that was made between the Egyptian and the Phoenician. And those were the arks of the covenant back in the day. And so he's traveling. He's a Sumerian, right? He's a descendant of the Sumerians. He was adopted as a prince, abandoned at birth. And then he was raised up by the pharaohs and the Egyptians. And then all of a sudden, he's like, all right, I'm going to sneak this weed from my dad. And then he starts and runs off. And he's got the pharaoh's weed, the pharaoh's books, and he's got the pharaoh's, sacred relics. And now he's trying to create a religion of Judaism around it. But it wasn't called Judaism because who is Judah? Judah has not even appeared in any of these. Judah is a futuristic or somebody who appears in the future of their religion. You see? So they pray in hopes that Judah will one day appear, but he has never appeared. The succession of prophets show that it is Siddhartha, Jesus, and Muhammad that have appeared to form of the religions of Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. And then Judaism is there under a succession of kings, of David and Solomon and all of those who are kings, and Rehoboam banishes the Israelites. He's like, you guys have sinned. He's like, you guys, you transgressed against the gods. And that's how the Pharisee came to hate, because they were banished. That's how the Pharisee came to hate these incarnations. And so when Jesus showed up, they were like, oh, here he comes. We're going to be in it again. We're in for it again. They were just scared. They were like, they didn't know what to do. And it just talks about how everything that was happening. And now I'm not really contesting anything that's spoken in the Bible.
But I'm reading the part in Exodus where God's telling Moses how to build the ark. So if you're saying that he took it from the Egyptians, that's
sure it wasn't biblical. That. You sure it wasn't Noah that was taught how to build an ark?
Can I get my polymath friend?
You sure wasn't Noah? Patrick's in the audience. Noah that was taught how to build the ark, and that God was telling Moses, "You better get on a boat and hit the high seas at that point."
Are you going to say Noah didn't build the ark now?
No, I never said that. But it's funny. There's this one guy, and his name is I forget what his name was. I want to say it starts with a W or something, but he claims to have found the ark of Noah and the Ark of the Covenant. And he seems to have been able to find both of those. Like Ron, I can't remember his name. He's literally like a Southerner too, and he traveled with this group all the way to the Middle East.
He must be pretty smart if he's a Southerner.
Well, he says that he took the information that was in the Bible and that it was cryptic to him, and that he deciphered it, and it helped him lead to the place where he dug underneath the Temple Mount and found.
What I'm saying is I don't understand why so much of your story has to be sort of based on it. But it's like you said, low tide and high tide instead of the fact that Moses parted the waters. That why do you can
Why would you think that people back then had so much magic power? I mean,
Again, we're talking about literature, okay? I'm not attesting to anything, even though I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to.
But you're asking me things that I think
I'm saying, according to the Bible, Moses parted the Red Sea. He did. It wasn't low tide and high tide.
When you say parting something, that means literally just going between something.
Yeah, but God, to cross. I mean, do I have to read the entire Bible to you?
I'm saying it's your interpretation.
Literally, the Bible says that God.
Tony.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is Moses with an ark that he stole from the Pharaoh, and that they took?
No, he built the. God gave him instructions on how to build the ark, and
after he buried the other ark that was the Pharaoh's, because he went and took the manna. It said he achieved that state of enlightenment when he took the mushrooms and he went and spoke with the burning bush. What's the burning bush, Tony? Some good.
It's not weed.
Yes, it is. What's today?
No, it's not.
Tony?
The burning bush was the symbol of God.
It is the day of atonement for Tony.
Oh my goodness! The burning bush was a symbol of God's appearing to him in the desert, on top of the mountain where he received the 10 Commandments.
That's the good weed.
Heresy.
Yeah.
Heresy.
No, can't say it in Hebrew. Cannabosum. What's cannabosum mean? Cannabis.
I don't know, but I don't.
Well, then there you have a missing part of your knowledge that you need to piece together. And remember, things were made by these people. Okay, we never saw the old texts directly translated. Have you ever sat down and looked at the scrolls that were left, that were made into the Old Testament, and how each symbol you have little pieces of stories that are pieced together. So the entire timeline of the history is much more valuable as far as understanding and coming to a total.
I think theologians pretty much agree on the translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, but what I'm saying is they're very limited as to a timeline of events that happened over years.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, there's not much evidence of what happened. So they had to kind of piece together a story about it. And that's where the sensationalization comes from the author of the book called Francis Bacon. And that's when they all convened.
The only thing I have a problem with, honestly, is that the books that you refer to you take them literally, but I can't take the Bible literally. You see, and this is what because this goes back to the doctrine of Christianity, that there is a doctrine, and that Christianity is based on the crucifixion of Christ.
Well, it's also based on other elements too, man.
I mean, in a nutshell,
the Bible itself is a combination of both the Old Testament of Judaism,
right? But everything in the Old Testament is leading up to the coming of the Messiah, right? And Jesus comes, he enters.
It's to a revelation. It's where you blaspheme in front of everybody. You go, Jesus Christ, look at that vault right there. Jesus has risen. That's right. You have to look up to find Jesus. Jesus is in the heavens, and that's where they parked his vault, and that's where they put his tomb. And it was temporary because the Rosicrucians only had the interest of keeping this safe, this secret. They had vowed to keep this secret safe for 100 years. And so after that time period came around, George Washington and the founding fathers. And now what do you have on that? Okay. Go up to that picture I showed you again, because we're going to look at the other side of the seal. Okay.
Let's see. What did I do with it? You would think this thing would just open in a picture view
Thou speaketh heresy.
Thou speaketh heresy, dude.
No, thou speaketh of New Jersey.
No. You're going to get me struck by lightning as a Christian.
Ride that lightning, baby.
Well, this is, nothing ever works when you're wanting it to. Here we go. It's going to open here in just a second.
Some people have learned so much that they can't be taught from the invocation of the Spirit when the Spirit.
No, you see,
That's not it. It's in good faith, but it is still confusing to those who know of the lodge of the Freemasons.
No, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Christianity, there's no mystery surrounding Christianity. Okay. You see, the whole purpose of...
Wait, go back to that picture, Tony.
But I know, but I just have to say this. The whole purpose of the gospel is to reach as many people as it can, so there's no mystery, right?
But what are you teaching them to follow is the mystery. That's what you have to teach them, how to save themselves and save others.
It's very simple. You just have to profess that Jesus is Christ and he died for your sins.
It's not about talking and invoking some sort of blissful.
No, it's done internally in your heart with a relationship with God, and there's no mystery there. Right?
Go find Jesus and ask him.
People. It's like the Jesuits and the Rosicrucians. They want there to be a mystery because they've created their own doctrine, right? And that's what people do. It's like the Mormons created their own doctrine. The Catholics created their own doctrine, but Christianity has a doctrine. And
you have to understand.
That's what Christians follow.
You are speaking in a way that seems. I'm 48 years old. You are speaking in a way to me that seems like you are trying to indoctrinate me in something that I do not believe existed.
I'm not. I'm saying that what you're saying is not Christian. Is not part of the doctrine of Christianity. It can be anything you want, but it's not part of the doctrine of Christianity.
So go back to the other side of that seal, if you would, and so we can carry on.
I'm not criticizing you at all. I'm just saying.
You win the argument. You've already proven that I don't have anything to argue about.
I'm not arguing with you.
Neither am I. Go on. Please go on to that other picture. And
I want you to know I'm not criticizing
I'll show you more of the great mystery in the Bible.
I'm not criticizing you at all. As a Christian, I have to state certain things. And one of them is that there's no mystery surrounding how you become a Christian, right? You don't have to be a code breaker to be a Christian, to become a Christian.
How do you translate Aramaic?
It's been translated for our Bible.
The Rosetta Stone doesn't have Aramaic on it.
So what did you want to show here?
Go to that other side of the Great Seal.
This one?
So you can know what Jesus would buy if he had a chance. He'd buy your documentary if you had a really legendary version of it to put together. This is a good discussion, though, because it brings up key issues with Christianity that have to be spoken about in order for you to understand how and why the Bible was written, to keep the Catholics from influencing the indoctrination of Jesus wasn't meant to rule. He was a prophet. A prophet teaches you. He doesn't rule over you. So many people say, oh, Christ is returning as the king. They invented that story saying Christ is king. He was a prophet who was chosen to be a medicine man. And that is the important revelation that you come to in these discussions, because all of that which was made of the Bible was also made of other cryptic texts that were added at the times, including the Globe Theater and the Age of Enlightenment that was brought forth by Queen Elizabeth at the time period, and the Rosicrucian Order that was it was created as like their first department of education. It really was. And that's where they became like all scientists or all alchemists. And that's why they wanted to study so much, is because they found that knowledge was more important than just being bastardized into a religion and handed down and told what to do, and said, oh, if you don't follow,
it's voluntary. It's
right. I know it's not.
Nobody's making anybody become.
Listen to what I'm saying. They did this to a lot of people. Catholics had burnt women at the stake, calling them heretics.
That's Catholicism.
Exactly. That's why the
You keep
Protestants were so.
conflating Catholicism with Christianity, and I mean, it's kind of, I mean, to me,
They're Christians, bro, but they just don't want to accept
I
it.
know,
They
but
just don't want to accept it.
my point is that they've created their own doctrine. They've created a subculture, right? Kind of like what you're trying to do, or what you have done.
No, I'm not. I have no following other than just talking with people
I
about
don't mean you were trying to.
Yes, the next village idiot to be a prophet of Jesus, that sort of thing.
What's Patrick saying? We should have invited Patrick, and he could have been the moderator.
Prophet. Oh, I see. So a prophet will profit. Is that correct? He will be financially secure if his abilities to guide people to the righteous path is successful, because this will lead you to the Pass in Stowe, a great ancient place of mining and exploration dating back to the 1500s of the Spanish, that was also mentioned in the Gold Bug and other samples of gold that I've shown you on my previous podcasts and documentaries. This trail going up to it, Tony, is laden. I mean, laden with the heaviest samples of gold and silver I have ever seen in my life. A raw element. And it's so impressive. Just go to the dollar. Just go to the dollar bill real quick and pull up the Great Seal, because I want to show you the carving and the way that the carving is oriented.
Jesus, I just want to straighten out one thing. I never said Jesus was a prophet. He's not a prophet. Like Muslims, Islam considers him a prophet, but because they don't want to say that he's the son of God, so they they acknowledge him as a prophet. But I don't think that he is a prophet. Is that what you're talking about, Patrick? I mean, Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, not a prophet. He can say prophetic things, but he's not a prophet.
So which God was it? Is it like son of Zeus, or are we talking about like Janus, the god of doors, or are we talking about like which God?
Okay. Do we agree on this term? Which one?
The word prophet.
I didn't think we had a disagreement about the word prophet.
We didn't know. But that's interesting, because apparently he's bringing up some subject or a topic that we talked about that we had some disagreement with, which apparently we can't move forward unless we settle that issue. So,
well, we're not going to settle it. We can't. We can't settle it, because you're going to have your opinion, and I'm going to have
mine. I'm trying to add to this. You're supposed to add to this and make it greater, to outdo the life that we once had before. These are Bacon's teachings, man.
No. Yeah, but we don't worship Bacon's teachings. We don't. That's not what
the
Christianity.
The God King was King James I, and Francis Bacon. He was called Lord Verulam, and that was the Lord. Is only a Mason trying to confuse and lead you off the path in the forest. That's why traffic. I showed him every step there was to get through there, so he would not be lost. Yes, thank you very much.
Who is he calling a Mason? You or me?
He says I'm one of the screw face. And you asked in Ethiopia. You said which ark. We didn't finish that. We said which ark was, didn't they have the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia? Well, who came about in Ethiopia as one of the kings, who was called the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Ja Rastafari, and his name was Tafari Makinen, who was the one who helped lead the unification of the nations, and he incorporated both Christian, Judean, Islamic, Egyptian, and the Baha'i cultural standards into the foundation of the United Nations before he died. He oversaw the foundation of the United Nations, and
these are some of the rabbit holes I was talking about. I was trying to stay, I'm trying to stay on at least a few topics, but let me ask, because what God King, you referred to a person as a God King. which is a little bit, it's heretical in Christianity. Are you saying that you think a person
every 100 years, according to the cycles that are spoken about in the Bhagavad Gita, a god king is born, and he is called Him, Him, His Imperial Majesty, and the last god king that we had on Earth was him, Jah Rastafari.
You're speaking like Buddhism or Hinduism or
where Jesus got his weed from, man? Today is the magic day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I broke it down to some street science for you. My friends in New York City, they joke with me. They call me Knowledge, and I used to sell Christmas trees in New York City in the winter. And they say, "Hey, are you going to hang out with us and smoke some street Jesus?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
They were hippies. They weren't.
No, these were
the point I was trying to make earlier was that you're talking about that the fact that Christianity does have an accepted doctrine, and these other texts and other beliefs that you're talking about aren't part of it. You can say that they are. You like to think of them as, I don't know, additional text or beliefs or whatever. But it's kind of like the example I gave earlier, where the Mormons, had their own version of Christianity. They think that Jesus visited. What was his name? I try not to remember his name.
Angel Moroni? Is that
the founder of Mormonism, the founder of
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith, yeah, Joseph.
Yeah. That's funny. Joseph Smith, I think, not Brigham Young, but Joseph Smith had a piece of property that he owned on Oak Island, by the way. So that's where he came up with his. That's where he came up with his story about the hidden treasure, which is called the Parable of the Pearl of Great Price, that sort of thing.
How does Trump fit in all this?
Well, there's a swamp. There's a swamp on Oak Island that refuses to drain. So you say drain the swamp, and it's a joke because on Oak Island there's a money pit, and when you try and drain the swamp to get into the money pit, it just keeps filling the money pit up. It was like a tidal. It was a tidal collection, kind of like it was a pit that would collect the water, so that way they could drain the swamp and fix the repairs or fix the ships that were blasted during the pirate eras in those areas. So the pirates would move their ships in there, and they would basically close the swamp off. They would release a plug on the drain. It would drain into the money pit. And then basically the tide would then suck the water back out the other side. And then it would fill up during low tide, high tide. And so they had a hydraulic kind of swamp draining tool that they used on Oak Island. Well, what happened is Bacon knew about this place, and he wanted to create a trap for everybody. Anybody that tried to come and look for this treasure and didn't read the Bible and know what he was talking about, he was lured to a trap to his death. And so those pirates that came looking for this treasure, they would dig in the money pit, and then they released one of the plugs that were in there, and the place flooded. But not before they got a stone out of it, the story says. And on the stone is a cipher that we get a chance to go through. We should kind of skip over the whole, ideological argument of everything. Go to that seal that I was trying to get you to bring up, would you?
I'm not trying to create an argument about.
I know, but
ideology.
Would you please just grab that seal so that way I can go through the discourse of the realization of the Great Seal and
Are you talking about the one we've been looking at?
Yeah, but we're not looking at it right now.
No, I mean that seal, the same seal.
Yeah, the one that's got the vault on it, and the other one with the winking eagle on the other side.
I can't seem to get it to come up in just a viewer. It keeps wanting to open GIMP every time I try to open it. It's crazy.
You mentioned the Curse of Oak Island. Look what you did.
Yeah. I didn't mention it. You mentioned it.
Oh, no, it was you.
I didn't even know about the Curse of Oak Island.
You're the heretic. You're the blasphemer.
Yeah. E pluribus unum.
Yeah, one side says e pluribus unum, which means one of many clues that are in this. And that's why he's winking. The left eye is clearly seen to be kind of like a winking eagle's eye, But you can also see that the eagle is holding like a ribbon in its mouth in stone on the island, which is even more intriguing. So if you go and look at that, were you able to pull that up?
Which one?
The one with the seal that we were looking at before.
Am I not screen sharing?
Nope, there's no screen sharing going on. All I see is the vault.
Let me come back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All this time I was looking at it and you weren't. Okay. Yeah, because I was reading.
Cool. So now this guy, whoever this is embodied, is obviously he's great eagle's head, kind of eagle spirit. It's a Native American symbol, and I showed you on that one stone there was that eagle feather that was on it, right? It's just one feather, which is kind of like an angle that you just kind of you take in the whole approach to everything. He's holding a ribbon, and it means one out of many, and that's one out of many clues. And basically, in his left hand, he has 13 arrows. In his right hand, he has an olive leaf or an olive, drab, or not an olive drab, excuse me, like an olive branch. And it has
the color olive drab.
And right, yeah, it has 13. That's my military training speaking here. So on the right side, you have the olive branch, and that's supposed to be a symbol of fertility, that he brings life to the 13 colonies. And on the left-hand side, he brings the right of war, but he controls.
I thought it was peace and war.
It can be seen that way, but those are symbols that he controls the right. Like he's trying to stop them from fighting. You see, he keeps the arrows in his hand. Now above him is a secret that is a part of the Masonic order. There's 13 colonies, but there's a 14th star that's found hidden in those star arrays above him. And if you draw the Star of David or the Star of Judah, it leaves one star in the middle. And that's supposed to be symbolic that he's looking towards that direction from Nova Scotia, where that eagle's head is. And if you scroll down, you'll see it. And right there on Shut-In Island, that's the next clue you get to when you leave Oak Island. You just have to follow the clues that are there. And if you
you're saying this whole thing looks like an eagle's head?
Oh, yeah. And there's a ribbon right there.
I was wondering what that circle was.
I circled it's an image of the menorah. And that's part of the clues that are on Shakespeare's tomb, because you're supposed to look for, at that step, Shakespeare guides you through it step by step. And once you leave Oak Island, you've taken some measurements, and Bacon was both Judea and Christian. And King James, that was King James's star from Scotland, that Star of David, Star of Judah. So they were both Judea and Christian together of the Bible. And that's what they had intended us to be. And so now on the right-hand side, or on the right side of the picture, you see the image of the menorah. And then on the left-hand side, you see the image of the bishop's hat. You see the bishop's hat there on the left-hand side? Kind of follow the crack in his forehead around. That's
like an eyeball of the eagle almost.
That's the bishop on the right, the right side. And the left side's kind of like a symbol that's found in the pamphlet. You can see, follow the little crack along the edge until it stops. There it is, in a little circle right there. Yep, that's it. And that's this alchemaic symbol, and that's found in the Sublime Prince with the Greatest Royal Seal, or the Greatest Royal Sublime Prince with the Greatest Royal Secret. And that actual part, it relates to the allegory that's also seen on the seal, which relates to the different feathers of the eagle, the different parts or the different angles that you're supposed to take. And if you go look at the Sublime Prince with the Greatest Royal Secret pamphlet, it says step by step you go through these islands, and there's a symbol. There's 5 of them that you land, and Oak Island is the 3rd on the list. So this is the 4th right here. And you'll see that in the positioning that you're supposed to find these symbols at each individual location. And so what you're doing from here is right where the eagle is looking is your next step that you go to. And then you take a measurement from there. And all you do is draw a line horizontal from that point, and it goes right to the vault. Literally horizontal.
Now I know where it is. So
what's that? Oh yeah. Well, that's if you can find shut in island. Oops, I told you where it was. I wasn't supposed to do that. I was supposed to just forget about it all and just go back and do the secret handshakes with everybody. And but see, like, I never joined the Freemasons. I told one of the Masons in the lodge here about this, and he was so happy to hear about it. He was like, "Hey, let's go." But there was a bunch of ice and snow there, so we were like, "There's no way we're going to get up there." We had to wait till everything just became a much better weather opportunity. So then we went up during, when the weather was better, and I installed bolt anchors. I set up everything all the way up. Now, once you get to the base underneath the vault, there's no way that you can climb up that and get in. Everything is loose and broken, so that way if you try and climb up it, you'll start pulling rocks off. There's like tons of little booby traps along the way with this whole adventure. Like, the money pit was not the only booby trap. And you asked me, have I been in it yet? But there's a false bottom floor that you get in. Once you get in, there's an area that's just kind of like precariously kind of aligned. You remember that one part in Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, where he's like, you have to spell the name of Jesus, to get across that area. And it was a bunch of tiles with letters on it. That's kind of like where you're at in that whole adventure. Like, you're going into a cave at the end of it, and you have to kneel before God, so this sword doesn't cut your head off or whatever. And then you have to get through this whole entire chamber, with a false bottom floor. And then at the other side is, and this is the most beautiful part about it, there's an altar that's inside of it, and it's kind of like, you could see it like almost dressed up in The Last Crusade, similar to the way that this looks, because they describe the way that the tomb looks in the other carvings that are on the waterfront. Remember when I told you there was a carving, the Ark of the Covenant, on the waterfront?
I don't remember you telling me. Yeah, but
well, it's about 4 feet or 6 feet, tall, and about 8 feet wide. It's like a pictorial representation of the Ark of the Covenant itself. But at the same time, inside of that carving are smaller little miniature carvings that are the side view of the entrance here, and what the chamber looks like inside, what the approach angle looks like, what the carvings look like on the face. So when you're seeing this right here, you haven't even seen the rest of the carvings that are on this space. There's a sword in the stone that's 40 feet tall. There's a helm surrounding it. There's a shield. There's the image of a guardian knight. Maybe
where is this in the cave you're talking about here, or
this is outside the? As you approach this cliff, this cave is sitting up on like a high pitch on a ridge to get up to it. But in order to ascend to that level, you have to be able to interpret. You can't see it, right? Like, you won't be able to see it unless you're across the valley, taking a picture at it. But if you go following the route that leads you through, it doesn't allow you to see where it's at. So you're blindly following this thing. But once you come to this final location, you're like, oh my God, this is the sword in the stone that they talked about. The Arthurian legend is there. It's a huge 40-foot high, tall, double-handled, broadsword. It's like a dragon slayer. And it's a huge helm that surrounds it, like a French helmet. And then there's the shield of Dagobert on the left-hand side, which is the long extended shield from his crusade. And then as you climb up this ridge, there is an image of a knight that is situated, a guardian knight that's watching over it. And somehow they were able to cut the rock so it looked like he was wearing like a white garb with like a black charred cross. And there's the legend of the Knights Templar, the charring cross relates directly to these missions and their order. So they were very adamant about creating these pictorial references. And when you get up this ridge, you're greeted, like right when you turn the corner of this like precarious, like where you're surmounting this precarious like round bald area where you can kind of take a rest. And there's like a huge lion's head that's carved there in the side of the rock, and it protrudes out. And there's the there's that story from the Knights Templar, only with a leap from the lion's head will you prove your worth. And so I installed anchors there because it's the perfect measurement of 30 meters from the base. And you can rappel right off the edge of that. You can literally take the leap of faith off of that and learn to rappel.
I saw the video where you were putting the anchors in the stone.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Maybe we can watch a little bit of that next time.
Yeah, because listen, when we're going through the ciphers, I want to rip through these ciphers real quick with you, step by step, and you'll see the logic that Bacon put into all of them. Because
I've got about 10 or 15 minutes left.
Yeah, let's just ping through it real quick, because people can see all this on my webpage too. I put it all up on Secret Mission, and then the number 4, and then the word King. So Secret Mission for King on Facebook. Or you can just search for a Secret Mission for the King on YouTube, and the video will come up with like a nice short kind of walkthrough. I mean, it's hard to kind of sensationalize this because it's really so complex, and to talk people through it is more like an educational story line, like a PBS sort of thing. It would be like a multi-part series. I have 2 film companies that are already interested in working with me, and we're organizing different parts of the segments for the scissor reels, not just here but in Arizona. And then I also have I've been approached by the guys that made that show Curse of Oak Island, and about 5 years ago they asked me to give them like a 15-minute walkthrough, and they would give me 15 minutes to kind of explain all this. I mean, and I told them there was no way that you could even summarize it all in 15 minutes. You know what I mean? That was the Curse of Oak Island show. Beyond Oak Island, the Prometheus company, the film production, they were like, wow, we're totally amazed at this. We love the site. And I was like, you gave them 10 seasons, but you're only giving me 15 minutes. I was like, all my work just wraps theirs up. It's like, what's that going to be for them? Why don't you make this into a real full-length documentary? And they were like, wow, whatever. They just wanted to keep their franchise going, which is just spinning wheels on Oak Island. They don't want to ever leave. And they think it's just like, oh, there's got to be something in the money pit. I was like, okay, that's why Trump's like, we're going to drain the swamp, But again, it's one of those jokes. It's got allegory to it. The swamp will never drain because it always fills the back up when the tide comes around. And that's twice a day. So...
Well, what were the things you were wanting to go through quickly? Because I really do need to get to bed early tonight. So
just hit the. I'll run through the ciphers real quick for you so people can see them. Start at the first cipher that was found with the doorway at the church, because that's really descriptive, and the way they put that together was kind of magical. And those were the priests that he met with in Paris, and Berenger Saunier ended up going through. It's not on that page. It's in the email that I sent you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just go ahead. I thought I had put those points up.
Well, Saunier, he basically was kind of amazed. As soon as he found what he found, he packed everything up and went to Paris immediately. And he bought a copy of the painting Et in Arcadia Egeo, which is also called The Shepherds of Acadia. And so when he bought that copy, he returned later on and he had a bunch of money, and he was able to afford to renovate the entire church. And he did so in a pretty majestic kind of manner. And one of the things he did was redesign the front of the door and the doorway of the entry to the Chapel of Mary Magdalene. And so go ahead and try and pull that up if you can, just because that's kind of...
What am I trying to pull up?
That first cipher I sent you on the email, which was the email I sent you, and it's got an image of like a stone slab, and then there's just a bunch of images of the doorway, which has like a bunch of writing on it, and a keystone that's there too, because that's part of the key to understanding everything. It was built into the cipher, which is cool because he wrote it in Latin. He did it all in Latin, and he didn't make one mistake. So everyone that reads it's like, oh, that's just a Latin phrase. But the words he chose and the way that he positioned them, I was like, oh man, this guy was good. You could totally just use the myth of Christ the rest of your life.
I'm trying to understand what I'm looking for.
It's that first in the email where I sent you, where it had that list of maybe 15, different photos. And in that first email that I sent you with the photos, the first photo is a picture of like a stone kind of epitaph with the image of Sanier, Berenger Sanier. And it kind of looks like overall like the shape of Vermont. And then there's an image of the doorway. And then you see my worksheets where I'm breaking down the actual physical cipher, which is cool. I just kind of want to show that. That begins the great mystery at that point of reference and helps guide you to the final point, because it explains exactly where you're going. You're going from old France to new France. And it's pretty cool. He even capped, not that one, the one before that. There you go. Okay, now if you can zoom in a little bit on that image on the left, just the big flag.
I think I have to open this. This is the frustrating thing about this. I can only. Oh, there we go. I didn't think it was going to.
Yeah, so this is an image of Berenger Sanier, right? And now it's cut in the shape of Vermont. It's literally like an outline of the shape of Vermont from Lake Champlain on the left to the Connecticut River on the right. And you see where his head is kind of cut in a certain way. Like there's a line going across his head kind of area. That's the border. Yeah, that's the border with hair. Yeah, that's the border with Canada going up to that's Vermont beneath it and Canada above it.
Okay.
And so now if you're hearing him correctly, that's exactly where the vault is situated. You see what I mean? And it kind of looks like that's the number 2 inside of his ear in like a Roman. Kind of zoom in a little bit if you can. So he kind of carved like that's the vault right there as it's situated in the map, and the map itself is meant to be shaped as an outline of Vermont. And so he's really cryptic in the way he did it. And that's how they had left that. And that's just because he was like, well, I'm gonna die, I better leave it for somebody who knows how to break the code. And so if you zoom into the picture where it says, you got the little keystone there, it says terribilis est, which means like this is a terrible place. And like you're supposed to like abandon all hope, he who enters this sort of place. And it's supposed to be like to induce a state of fear in the individuals. So if you could zoom out just a little bit, I'll explain the cipher. Okay, so you got Domus Medor Musaroni's Vocabitur, that sort of thing is the top line. And then Terrasilil est, Terrasilis est, and then Locus est. So it is Locus is terribilis, as you're reading it, is the way that the phrase is made, because that's one of the phrases that's inside of the ciphers of the parchments. So he's just kind of reiterating that these parchments have reference to this. But if you're looking at the numbers here, you got the first number where I made the lines, there's 7 letters there, right? And then there's 11 letters on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it ends at Domus Me, right? My dome, my forehead, that sort of thing. And my thought. And then he's got the number 7, and then he's got the number 11 is vocabitur on the other. So it's the way that the vocabulary is spoken, it's spoken, and you have to hear the words. It's a phonetic translation of what you see inside of it, because he's physically speaking in a tone, so he's trying to transfer information to you from that cipher. It's kind of like spoken from the abbreviation of the word. It's basically another way of saying, all right, I put some stenos in this, shortened phrases, go ahead and sound them out and just box them all in. But here's the thing. Terribilis is 10 letters, and Locusist is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 9 letters, right? So I went with a 9, right? Like, because to me, that was like the way that I interpreted everything of being lined up. It was just kind of like my interpretation. You got the number 7, 11, And so being odd, being an odd cipher, you're looking at the number 9 in between them, and he's kind of highlighting the words in between them. So I went over here on the right-hand side, and if you just scroll over to the right-hand side, you'll be able to see the logic that's in that first side in the middle underneath. It's no big deal. All it's saying is the terrain rises, palimpsest map, first is the isle test, like to see if you can get off Oak Island. And the other is to relocate your location. Is a U.S. site? Yes, it's terrible. Use this first. And terribilis is locus east is like something that's written in one of the paintings and in the parchment. So it kind of matches together. It's like use that one first. But go over to the right-hand side where all of this stuff is shown here, because this begins the journey, and this tells you
it down here or
up at the top part. So here you have the words that are in that Latin part are then placed here in a 9-letter configuration. And then by putting them all together, you cancel out the pairs, and you see how I crossed all the pairs out, right? So it says turn is at 7, steers to Oak Island, all right? So that's your first step. So you take out the pairs and you turn it to 7. So now you got a 7-letter cipher there, and you can kind of see Vermont shows up right there, right? And you just take those pairs out. And if you notice the shape of the way the pairs are made, it's exactly the same where you put the slants through them as the way the vector is built, right? And so then the reed, which is the Old English box ciphers inside of it, is vector is real, Vermont is a real location to use to locate le trésor. And the treasure that he speaks of is the treasure of Rennes Le Chateau. And that's where it begins, the whole adventure. No one's been able to break this stuff down. So, I mean, these are really, really technical reads on his ciphers. And then you go through the pairs on this one, and there's only one set of pairs on each one of the final ones. So there's like 4 more little steps. Little Vermont River, it no cross Massachusetts, true luck or true look. And then you need to, be able to look, truly for it. And then you have a mystery cave, a bacon virtue, a TT treasure, and then it says INRI. You see where that says that vertical underneath that?
Right.
And so there you have the mystery cave of a bacon virtue, a treasure trove treasure of INRI, of Jesus. I forget what that stands for in Latin. But I remember that means here lies the King of the Jews when they placed that on his cross, right? I just don't know what it says. So this is a story of where Jesus lies. Here lies the King of the Jews, And then here, the next one, it says, and this is really funny, it doesn't spell Vermont. It's Varmont. And so he captured, which is funny because all the Vermonters, they all speak in a certain tone and they call it Varmont. I swear to God, like if you're from Vermont, like back in the day, the French guys, they all call it Varmont because they're like, in reality, if you said ver in Spanish, that means maggot. And mont means mountain. So they didn't want to actually say maggot mountain because that's part of the mystery. If like, you think you come from a place, it's called the Green Mountains. It's Verde, Verde in French, Verdemont, which was how it was described in Champlain's expedition. So here now they're saying Varmont, and these are always intentional when they're made professionally. And so now the final one is rescue, reclaim, and to earn the rose, or rose urn, which is kind of like says that there's an urn there. You see what I'm saying? So the remnants obviously were placed in an urn of some kind that was in the vault. And if you scroll up, you'll see the vector. The vector has a PS on it at the bottom, right? And then there's an angled. This bottom vector has like a line that's in it. It literally is an arrow that's drawn up to the upper left, and that is the vector that sits over France. And so if you see kind of, you have an intro, right, which is at Pearl Island, is a symbolic reference of Pearl Island. And then you have a Hobson Island over here and an Oak Island. And now the thing is if you look at the map that we're going to go through, you're going to see all these symbols on the map. And so Bacon actually embedded all those symbols in the cipher to act as, and I've got a more devout kind of examination of this in its own page so you can see everything. And if you flip, can you go to the next picture that I sent you? And we'll just kind of walk through them real quick. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that much time. We need to maybe we need to save some of this for part 2.
Yeah, well, it'll probably go part 3 if we get caught in the Bible Gospels.
Well, I mean, some of that was a surprise to me. Okay, so I mean, I can't stay here. I'll be honest with you. I can't sit here for 2 hours.
I know. So on the right, you have the first cipher. Okay. We'll start there with the zoom in. And if you can zoom in, you've got an intro, right, on the right-hand side, right? And Bacon highlights the intro that serves as a complementing map of this. And it's the intro in the works of Shakespeare of the folio. It says, "To the reader." And so see where it says TR, and the letters TR are lifted right there, right? But it also says, if you box them in, it says in trois. And so it means it's in 3 parts. So then you follow the word, because you can find trace right next to it, right? In trois, trace. And then up further, you get the final sections, which say a primo o tu segundo, which means the first to the second. And so it's showing you from the first segment to the second in 3 parts. And which is really cool because there's 3 physical parts. 1 is a map, and 2 is kind of a descriptive symbol of what are known as, like Mason squares. You see the 2 squares, one's green, one's red. And one says Proposition 13, and it also says Sion, right? See right there in red, the red Mason's tool. And then on the left side, the other one says, it mentions the word sextant, which is you're trying to draw a, what is it called? Like a measurement tool, a tool used for navigation.
Almost like a compass.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The Mason's compass, which is a square and compass, or the combination of those two. So he's adding anagrams that relate directly to this information. And basically, he's trying to encrypt it in a certain way so it actually draws out. So you're starting at the top, and you have kind of like a mark, and primo do segundo, or to the second from the first. And then basically what you have right here is you just have, this is really cool because Bacon, he was using the letters of the alphabet, LMNO. And if you go to the end of the letter of the one side of the Masons thing, it's got the LO on the green and the red over there. And then if you've got on the other side, it's the MN there. So you can kind of see it. It's just LMNO. And he's just showing you points of reference within the ciphers. And they've all been either accentuated or lifted in some manner so they stand out from the rest. If you were to take all of these letters raised that are elevated out, it gives you an entire storyline. It says, to Dagobert II belongs this treasure, and he is there dead. But it also mentions, it says, Poussin and Tenière hold the key. And so you're looking at 2 paintings that hold the key.
Where did this cipher come from, this one?
These were both found inside of a baluster, which is like a small column inside. And when they were renovating the church, they turned it over to kind of move it. And they found inside a false segment of the base. And they pulled the plug out, and inside was a glass vial that had like a cork seal on it and a wax seal. And inside were these 2 ciphers. And so these were the ciphers that were found in the church.
How old are these?
1600. I would assume Bacon made these after they had charted everything.
How do you know Bacon did it?
Because if you follow the red line, right, you see the red line of the square, and it just kind of goes to a plus, right? Follow it up to the left till it dead ends at a plus, right?
Yeah.
And then the words that are directly above it are Kaban and Siban, right? So that's bacon and bacon spelled two different ways right next to each other. Those are the only two patterns that appear that way in the entire cipher. You see, and those are the ones that stand out. You got a CABA and a CEBA. You know, it's like Kabant and Sibant. So, you know, bacon and bacon, the savant, I guess. You need to be an idiot savant to to be able to read it. I don't know what he was interpreting, but he was trying to use Latin and all of the ancient studies so that way they could be made of mention here. And if you zoom in onto the left-hand cipher, it has its own unique patterning, but you also find two Masonic squares that are there. So that's good. That carries on in the same way. See over here, there's a short one on one side where it says Sion, 4 letters, and then a longer one. There's one that's there on the right side. And then one on the left, it says reveals bets on a mountain, or it reveals it be on a mountain. See MTTSN, mountains, and then it's kind of like an ON, and then it's a B, MTTDS. The blue one on the side there, yeah. And then on the vertical, it's revealed. Revealed, it'd be on the mountain. So that's the final segment, because you were told you're going from step 1 to step 2. Now zoom into the top here.
Up here?
Yeah, up at the top where those arrows are. And you see how the number 2 is highlighted right there on the left-hand arrow? See, yeah, that right there is clearly a letter number 2, isn't it?
Looks like it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if
well,
you
what's that Greek letter? It's not an alpha. It's not
it
not
is.
an alpha.
It is, but it's meant to stand out in a way that you could see, because you see, you're meant to see with 2 eyes, even, right? He's trying to tell you that it's a visual tool that he's using right there. You see where the words are encased? So everything that's in between those symbols is part of a message on each one of those lines that he wants you to see. And so I've gone through and looked through each one and found where that symbol actually exists, drawn like a number 2. And you'll notice that A is drawn on this cipher. Go down here to zoom back in though. Zoom back in.
Well, the way I have to navigate is I have to zoom, and then because it won't let me move unless I'm at a certain zoom level.
Okay.
Where do you want to go?
Just up a little higher on the lines, right there in the middle of the. Okay, so look at this line right here, a little higher next to the one that's that one right there. You see, you just crossed over the A. Go up and to the left. There. See how the capitalization of that A is there? Well, the other ones are the A, the lowercase a, where the number 2 is there. You know, those representing the letter A, but in lowercase. So those lowercase A's stand out from the uppercase A's, in which they encrypt or they box in a certain segment of this statement. Because this pamphlet right here, it's literally just a storyline when it translates. I forget exactly what it is, but it's not even like, it's just a random story of some like old time period. And then I haven't figured out what all of these at the bottom are, because you have all, yeah, well, that's a mark that's found at the base of the cliff before the climb up to the vault. That's that little crack, all those little.
So that's not north and.
No.
Oh, okay.
That's that NOI is that no is Sion backwards. So you're looking at it like you have to flip this upside down to use it as a map, and it acts as a map with these so if you read it this way, it just uses the letters and the box ciphers to decode a message. But if you flip it over, the symbols, the little dots and the little dashes and everything that's in it, that's found inside. It forms an overall map of locations that you can find described in each one of these box ciphers. It's so complex. I can't really represent it here. I could walk you through it, but it would just take a while. It's really creative. And
well,
now,
let's do that. Let's do that in the next one.
Well,
I'm really over my time right now. I have like 5 things I have to do before I go to bed tonight. It's really getting
real quick. Give me 5 more minutes, real quick.
Okay.
Click the next button, because we just left France on an arch that's drawn there, and there you have the boxes where I was trying to show you that. That's how you know that Bacon's there. So go ahead and clip the next one. That's the only pattern that you're going to find there of repeating words. Here's the puzzle, and believe it or not, you can't even tell it's a map. Right?
I wish this would stop. The next time I'm going to have a better viewer. I'm going to have all these images so they'll be in a viewer instead of on a web page.
So you see the guy that's there. There's a shadow of a younger shadow behind the man, right?
There.
Yeah, and it looks like he's saluting with a hand of some kind, right? He's almost like saluting. So it's like a symbol of sailing.
Oh, that's not supposed to be the shadow of his hand, his arm.
Well, I mean, look at how curved it is in the painting.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah.
Right. So one's got a curvature and the other one's straight. It's obviously something cryptic in some kind of manner. And so you see that his foot is stepping on like a step, right? That's from that point you see where he's pointing. That's the first step in the new world on Pearl Island. And so go ahead and click the button, because we just left France. Yep. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can kind of see a little castle here. In the bottom right-hand corner, I'm sorry about that. You see that? Yeah, you just hit it with the mouse.
Down here?
Yeah, that's supposed to be the castle Lamont, San Michel, that sort of thing, which is around La Rochelle. It's a little bit to the north.
Is this some sort of pictogram of that thing that we just saw?
Well, these guys, they figured out that if you silhouetted that whole painting, it makes a map of the entire coastline of France and Spain. And it's one of the most majestic discoveries ever. You see the pentagram, that's the main large pentagram that's formed of the layout. That's that eye, right where her eye is, that's Paris. And that's supposed to be the goddess Paris herself. And that's the Paris meridian that leads all the way up. It's kind of like the prime meridian. And this forms a map, and you're kind of like going that way, but curving the arch to the upper left-hand corner. And if you notice the angle there as the 36-degree angle, that's the angle that you choose on the compass, which is recognized as being, the compass setting that you're supposed to use. And so once you lay this over France, it's all right.
What did I do?
There you go, right there. It's a majestic map, man. This thing, I silhouetted it at one point over Google Earth, and you can see where the angles line up perfectly. And as you line them up, the outlines of the trees that are in the painting, they serve as the outlines of the coastlines. And so, and the thing is you shift the compass over to the left and then rotate it 36 degrees. And where it rotates is the next point of reference where the actual shoreline is at. And there you'll see port after port after port, and they're symmetrical all the way around. Like, this is like how the old cities were chosen, like where they decided to put one. They used this symbol, and this is like a really big discovery of this kind of cartography and geomancy incorporated together, so that way it can be made into like a map that's hidden inside this painting. And this is part of the journey that gets you there. The beautiful part is when it finishes, as it's rotating around all the way up into Scotland and all the way over into New Scotland through Labrador and everything like that, Nova Scotia, the painting is rotated and it's completely upside down, like the parchment, right? Like, and so here's the thing. Her dress is actually Niagara Falls at that point. And you see the image of Niagara Falls right there over the map. And it's like, oh, this is the old explorer. Because look at how her feet look like it's water, right? It looks like a bunch of water for her feet. And underneath there, that's the St. Lawrence Seaway and everything about it. It's one of the most beautiful, beautiful maps. That's why I have to get a graphic artist to work on this, because I can capture the stills of it, but to see it actively moving and rotating where it highlights all the different shorelines, and each one of them is sequenced around all the way around the pentagram. It's really beautiful. Can you flip to the
I really have to go. Yeah, I do, man.
You're not okay. All right.
You gotta be able to honor my time limits a little bit here.
I do, but like I said, we got caught in a big ideological debate, and all I wanted to do was run through this whole thing. I was just trying to commemorate this, because 222 is a very important revelation in the Bible. It is, and everybody needs to understand that. So, because there's so many people that are imprisoned politically over just an herb, and it's helped me survive cancer. And that's one thing that is really part of my life, and so that's why I stress that so much. Thank you for understanding that and listening to that, dude. So maybe next time, let's go do a part 2 and try and fly through this, get to Oak Island, and calculate how to get off Oak Island. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's great. I just have to. I literally have to even revise a few drawings before and send them to this contractor before I go to bed tonight. So I'm going to be, it's going to be a bummer. So I'm trying, and I got to take a shower, and I got to call my son. It's just, it's crazy.
Right. You got to chase all the raccoons out of the trap.
It's just, but it's all very interesting. And you just have to understand that, certain Christians are going to push back a little bit against the ideology. But it's okay. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just it's just a counterpoint. That's all.
Just remember that Saniera is a priest, and if he's saying, "Here lies the King of the Jews," man, and in the cipher it says, "And he is there dead." I just know what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing, and why so much work went into this, because there's no other reason to have put this all together unless it was something really important that they wanted to keep secret, but tell people at the same time. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They wanted you to be aware that there were invasive groups that were taking over. Because what had the Jesuits been doing in Spain? They had been flooding slaves into the New World in the Caribbeans, and were even trying to enslave the natives. So the Rosicrucians on the Order of the Helm came and made a covenant with the natives in this new land, so we could stay here, so we could live here. And that's the important part. And they traded of the medicines too. Again, this could be a very long, drawn-out documentary, but I'd like to wrap it up with you next time, maybe like next week.
We'll try to get started a little earlier next time. That way I don't have these time constraints. But,
and I also hate having to drag people's attention out too. Have we gotten good comments so far?
I think so. Okay. I'm even starting to lose my voice here. But cool. I think we've had a good participation, and I'm sure we'll have comments, through between now and the next time that we can go over if there's any questions there. So,
all right.
But I really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude.
I almost said your name. Sorry.
It's cool. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's no
Breaker. Yeah, I appreciate it, and I'll be talking to you in the DMs.
All right. Just don't forget. I am a Burger King. Okay.
Okay. You're a king, not the king.
No, I'm joking, but I'm being serious, man.
Yeah.
I'll hang out. Like I said, I'm too young to be the king. I'm just a sublime prince with a great royal secret now. All right.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it,
guys. Thank you so much for joining in. And like I said, hopefully next week we can finish this up.
Yeah, we'll do part 2.
Got it, man.
Thank you.
Peace, man.
See ya. Okay, there's my big head. I appreciate everybody coming and participating. I'm not going to lie, it's complicated to follow, and it's not something you do when you're in a hurry or sleepy, or you got to be able to pay attention. and follow along. Thank you for all the people in the comments. Thank you, Patrick, Carl. Thank all of you guys. Jake Raz. I appreciate the participation in the comments. I really do. And until next time, thank you so much.
What you are about to see is a real-life story. The accounts have gone into great detail to give you